Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to this week's edition of Book Bites on this 21st of March 2021, Human Rights Day in South Africa, and internationally known as the Day of Against Discrimination and Racism. It's a happy coincidence that we have the content for the show today linking up with Human Rights Day. We remember the Sharpeville massacre of 1960 and the almost 69 people and many more who were injured, 69 killed on that day just for protesting the past laws of the apartheid state of the time. Today's show, we have a book called Coolie Bandiet, which is an anti-apartheid struggle memoir by author and activist, political activist Zunaid Mosam from the Limpopo province. And I'm going to give you a brief on Mr. Mosam. Zunaid Mosam was born in Makado, which was known as Louis Trichardt in the Limpopo province. He had a checkered schooling career, having studied in Modimolle, Durban, Lenasia, Polokwane, and through correspondence. He holds a higher education diploma in journalism. He worked as a freelance journalist with Al-Qalam and was the founder, together with his friend Ibrahim Goor, of the Independent Mirror, a local newspaper in Potgietersrus. He worked as a lecturer at Integrity Business College and ran his own computer and training center, the Progress Business School. He served on the leadership structure of the ANC Pagameng branch. He also served as an ANC councillor in the Nylstroom Transitional Local Council, which we'll hear more about, and as a member of the mayoral committee in the Waterberg District Council. Between 1997 and 2000, he was elected onto the executive committee of the ANC Bushveld region and on the party's provincial executive committee. He did a stint on the executive committee of the Provincial Small Business Council in Limpopo and served on the board of directors of the Northern Province Investment Initiative. Having retired from public health, Zunaid is now pursuing his career in writing. Coolie Bandiet marks his debut into the literary world. And what a powerful memoir it is, not just because of the social value of listening to a story that's been written by someone who's lived through different regimes, has been part of the anti-apartheid struggle, but also because it's an important historical document of our time and a reminder of just how valuable freedom is, just how much was lost in order to get to where we are. And it seems like more and more we need those reminders. I'd like to welcome Mr. Mosam to the show. Zunaid, welcome to the show, and thank you for this opportunity. I think it's, like I said, a happy coincidence and maybe just perfect that we were able to get you for Human Rights Day.
Assalamu alaikum, Shafinaaz, and assalamu alaikum, namaste, tobela. Good evening to all your viewers. I'm actually glad that you've got me on this show on Human Rights Day. In fact, I was going to have an international online book launch of Coolie Bandiet, but unfortunately, we're having some issues with the bank accounts and that kind of stuff. So I'm very glad that you've got me on today.
Well, welcome. I think we'll have quite a valuable discussion that you can consider a semi-book launch in its own way. Let's jump right in because, the discourse of the apartheid time, let's talk about a little bit about the title of the book, especially the use of the word coolie. I know that, especially like my father's generation, my father is a key in point. The word is something that still riles the blood, because it was terribly meant and used, and you've been brave enough to put it because that was your title as a so-called terrorist during the apartheid regime. You've been brave enough to label, and rightly so, label your memoir. Talk to us about that, this concept.
Shafinaaz, from the onset, I must acknowledge that the word coolie is a derogatory term. And I use it with a great deal of circumspection. However, for me, using the word coolie is during that period, it was a very, very harsh period. So I tried to look for, I actually played around with a lot of titles. I mean, one of my nicknames in the township is called Sanyofa, means trouble, loosely translated means troublemaker. I don't know why. The other one is Fanamalaza, which means homeboy. But these name didn't actually give credit to that period of time. So Coolie, which is a derogatory term used for against Indians, and then the word bandit. If you look at the direct translation of the word bandit, means outlaw. And in terms and in view of, I mean, in view of the times and the way the apartheid government looked at us, we were actually outlaws against the apartheid regime. I must indicate that, look, I had to bounce this word with a lot of other activists. Some of my family members came very hard on me to say, how could you use a term like that? But I think, in order for me to give real credit, to project what the period was, I think Coolie Bandiet, was the best title I could come up with.
Thank you for that. I think I especially wanted to unpack it for younger viewers because I wonder if there's really a sense of just how bad a slur it was to be called Coolie. And in one of the scenes, you actually mentioned you making a phone call and a young boy picking up the phone and saying to his father in Afrikaans, "Your Coolie friend is on the line." I mean, it's so ingrained, and there's no doubt about it that there's no equality when you're labeling somebody in a certain way. You're not seeing them on the same level. And so it starts to make me wonder how much has actually changed from then and now. You're saying the apartheid government labeled us in a certain way, but we must actually be able to measure how much has actually changed along the years. Let's talk about your early years, your schooling, the struggle against the Bantu education system, while at the same time trying so hard to, to grasp some form of right and rightly so education for people of color at the time.
Okay, so I come from Mudimule, which is a very, very small town. It's actually a dorpy, which means in Afrikaans, a small town. We had in our school, when I was in the lower grades, we had 23 students in the whole school. I mean, that's half a classroom in some of the township schools. And we had multi-grade classrooms, so the teacher would teach three classes in one. And I recall when I was in standard 5, that is grade 7, we were 3 students. So you definitely got a position. I mean, first, second, or third. So so we actually had to get students from learners from Lenasia and El Dorado Park to literally keep the school afloat. Otherwise, government would have closed down our schools. After standard 5, there was no high school to attend. So many of the students from Mudimule would go to Polokwane, Johannesburg. My parents sent me to Durban. So the little anecdote here is my first day in school. There I was walking on the lawn. I mean, remember, it's like a plus Japi going to a city. I mean, we didn't even have robots in Mudimole. So here, when it wasn't Mudimole, then it was Nesrum then. So the first day I get to school, and there I was during break with my high seats, a diagonally contained container that holds juice, and my sandwich. And I was walking, and when I saw a ball coming towards me on the playground, I kicked the ball. And the next minute, there was a knife at my throat. So this is my first experience as a little boy leaving home. And you know what? At a very young age, we had to learn a degree of independence because there was no mommy or daddy to come and hold you and pacify you if something like this happened. So that was my first. And then from there, I went to from I went to a school called Methodist government aided school, a very dilapidated school. And then very next year, my standard 7 and 8. Sorry, I'm using 7 and 8. I mean, I'm from the old school. I went to Sessi College. It was one of the top schools in the country at the time. But because being far away from home, I decided no, I'm coming back to Nelsum and come to a school closer. So I went and I schooled in Trinity. But that's where the rebel in me was bred, because in Trinity, I got involved politically. I used to write all my essays or free, what we call free writing at the time, was against the apartheid government. And my dad heard about it, and he thought, hey, you know what, this lighty is going to get involved politically, and they're going to lock him up. So one weekend he came. I actually came back from a football match, and there I saw my dad's car on a Saturday, and he says, you know what, Zunaid, climb in, you're coming back home. I mean, that was the end of my formal schooling.
So you would
Yeah,
say you got
Shabina?
conscientized in those school years.
You know, actually, I was at Sesame College in 1976 when the Soweto uprising took place. And I recall then we had these discussions with the elder students at Sesame College, you know. And I mean, to us, it didn't. I mean, there wasn't real political consciousness, but we were aware to a certain degree. And for me, living in Durban, I had a lot of contact with varsity students. It would come, and I mean, there were three people in my family where I was staying that were at varsity. So you always came into contact with them and engaged with them from religious
Okay.
issues, you know, and a variety of issues. Yes.
Okay, so let's look at, I mean, Modimolle at that time, Nylstrom, a very, very small town, just sort of like off the highway. Very interesting to know that you had both conscientizing in that town, in the little small dorpy, as you put it, and leadership from within the areas to form and to lobby against the apartheid state. That's interesting for me. Talk to me about that as well.
So I must indicate to you, like, I worked on a very ad hoc basis with the Transvaal Indian Congress, the South African Indian Congress, and I think there also, you know, you to a certain degree you got conscientized. You know, even in when I was in Polokwane, I actually had a lot of contact with the Black consciousness movement. You know, guys like Pule Manama and you know others who you know we used to discuss, you know, quite often. And at that time also, I remember I didn't join any political organization. I was a member of the Media Workers, not Media Work, African Writers Association, you know. And it was more at the writing level where I joined organizations, but not politically. But when I came back to Mudimulle and I saw, you know, the township being conscientized by the Pakhameng Youth Congress was the leading organization in the struggle against apartheid. And that's how I became involved with the organization. So one afternoon, there's a guy called one of the comrades called Charlie McConey. He came to visit me, and the guy had a whole lot of welts on his back and his legs, and he was beaten by the cops, and he wanted legal assistance, and I helped him out, and that's how slowly I became more involved with the Pakhameng Youth Congress, but not actually a member of the organization.
So it really also is your circumstances and what you see around you brings out that need for social justice. It's
Absolutely,
not like sometimes you don't have a choice in the matter, you just have to resist against oppression. I know there's a scene in the book where you talk about being picked up from your house, waken up in your room and taken off, and they raid your room and they find some books and they leave aside Roots, the book Roots by Alex Haley. Talk to me about banned books under apartheid, because obviously I've heard about this before, and it's like there's no logic when a book about chess, like Black Kings, White Queens, is banned by apartheid, and a book like Roots is not banned, and yet that's a very, very racially charged commentary.
Look, I don't think, I don't know if Roots was banned, but I know there were quite a few books that were banned. In fact, I brought two books when I was in Botswana. I actually smuggled two books into the country. The one was War of the Fleet. It talks about guerrilla warfare. And the other one was, I think, one of Biku's books. I can't recall exactly. I think I like what I write, or one of those. I'm not very clear with.
Yes.
But I think the reason why the cop left Roots, I don't think he knew any better. He probably thought it was a gardening book or something of that sort. So I don't think, I don't know if Roots was banned at the time. I think the movie was also out at the time. It was, I think, a 9-hour series, if I'm not mistaken, or longer. But it was very, very, I mean, the other thing is that living in Mudimulle, no, we didn't have access to many books and of this kind, like especially political books. If I go to Joburg and I meet up with some comrades, then we would borrow books, with each other. One of the people that I worked very closely with at the time was Imran Hassan, who was also detained with me. And Imran and I used to share quite a few books. My friend Ibrahim Gur also, not necessarily political, but many other books. So Ibrahim has a very, very big collection of books, like, a huge collection. And, it's always good to go and visit. He's a very resourceful person to have, So, yeah, so like I said, there many books were banned, but I don't think there was really a clear cut. If they saw any book that, for instance, the history book, I need to mention this. When the cop raided the house and he opened my cupboard and he pulled out the books, he pulled out a history book that belonged to the Petersburg Indian and Colored High School. But because he saw various black leaders in the book, he thought it was banned until I had to show it to him. So I don't think
it was a government mandated book.
Sorry?
It was a government mandated book if it was in the education system.
Absolutely. It was a history book. It was a history book.
Right.
I hope Mr. Asghani is not listening to me because he wants his book back.
Well, let's talk about, your time in solitary confinement, your time in jail, because it was a very distressing time, obviously. It tested in so many ways. And also what I want to note in that time is this was not a time of social media. So what was interesting for me is that the time in jail was distressing, but at the same time, it brought together more of the leaders who were unfairly detained, and in some ways formed a network. You got to meet some of the other leaders of the different lobby groups in that time in jail. Talk to us about solitary confinement and the psychology of prison life.
So, I actually, when I got detained, I thought I was going to be there for 14 days. At that time, it was 14 days detention without trial. So I was like, quite happy to go through the 14 days. But when I got there, and remember, I've never been in a prison before, besides maybe locked up in a cell at the police station, but being locked up for over, for a couple of days. So for the first day, I walked into the prison, and I think the warder looked at me and he says, what, I don't think this guy knows the ropes about prison life. So he actually showed me, how to make my bed and that. And here I was in this very confined place with no reading material except the Bible. We weren't allowed any reading material, so except the Bible, and then later I requested the Quran, which I got, So it was very, very difficult because, I'm quite a social person. I always interact with people and that. So it was a bit depressing, but it also, you suffer from a kind of a mental block because you're not engaging with anybody. Although there were other comrades that were detained in solitary confinement with me, but there was no way to engage with them because there was a gate and a shutter that would keep you in that cell. In the cell, there was no ablution facilities. There was no proper bedding. You had to sleep on the floor, and you had like a jug. And you in that area, you confined to that space, 23 hours. So you have 1 hour to go and exercise, go and shower. So it was very, very difficult. Mentally draining also because there's absolutely nothing to do. You're literally wasting your time. In itself. If you had reading material, if you had reading material, it would made a big difference. But unfortunately, I wasn't very religious at the time. Not that I'm much very religious now, but for me, I don't mind. I didn't have a problem reading the Bible and that, but sometimes you need a sort of other books to read.
I also got a sense of the uncertainty, the fear, not just in the inmates, but the fear in the community as well. I think you've mentioned how some elders would say, but don't get involved in politics. You'll end up like those detainees who had been murdered in detention. So there was definitely a very big atmosphere of fear.
I think what happened is I think the scare it would, I mean the threat it would come very often was the death of Ahmad Timol and Babla Saruji. You know, I think I mean the first time I left when I left school and I came home and I started talking to my parents. And I mean that was my first interrogation. My uncles and my aunties and all of them, they were my first interrogators. And they actually asked, they actually threatened. They said, if you're going to continue like that, you're going to be, look what happened to Ahmed Timol, and it could happen to you too. Uh, the threat also there was you don't know. There was an uncertainty. For instance, one night, four of us were taken out of the cell during the day, put behind the prison cells, and later that evening we were driven to Port Mokopane, and interrogated there. So I mean, that's also another scale, because you don't know what they can do with you. I mean, you read about, about Steve Biko. When they detained him and they beat him, they took him away, a long distance. They drove away with him. So yes, there is that scale because the uncertainty of even during your interrogation, that uncertainty of getting beaten up. Fortunately, I wasn't beaten up. I mean, quite a few of my other comrades got beaten up. For instance, the one day, comrade Spunky, Mike Moatsi, who was my opposite neighbor in solitary confinement, he came home. He came back to the cell one day, and he had a gash on his forehead and a cut on his lip. And I asked, Spunky, what happened? Did you get hurt? And there were tears in his eyes, and he says, comrade Zu, I'll tell you, I'll speak to you later. And during lunch, what they actually did to him, they put a wet balaclava over his head, and they interrogated him. And the cut on his lip wasn't because they beat him up. He bit his lip when when he was interrogated and electrocuted. So I mean, when you hear this, and I hadn't gone for interrogation as yet. So that was a real scare for me.
I know that you also speak of a case when, is it a Dr. Hlatla was humiliated? He's sitting down and he's told to go and fetch a chair. I found that a very profound anecdote in the story because he's a well-known community doctor and you're having a chat with him and this cop tells him to go and fetch a chair. And he goes and he fetches the chair and you get upset with him and you tell him, why do you allow him to humiliate you? And he says, this is not what our fight is about. And so for me, the humility of the activists and the understanding of what the greater fight is puts all of you far above the oppressor who is actually lacking of logic and lacking of any sense of justice. As I said to you on chat earlier today, reading the book, even though I was too young to have experienced a lot of this, reading the book was very triggering to understand that racially there was this level of injustice and humiliation. PTSD, talking about also the kind of sounds in jail. I remember one interview I did a few years ago where the person said that the sound of dripping water and the sound of a key in their jail cell was something that it stayed with them for years after. You also mentioned a lot about the sound of those keys and waiting for the sound of those keys. Talk to us about sounds in solitary.
Everyone has very different experiences. Like, I think one of with me is that, they used to leave the light on all the time in my cell, throughout the night. And, until today, I can't sleep with the door closed. My curtains are open when I sleep, there must be some light coming in. I don't know whether it's psychologically, but, this is it. I mean, I have a problem sleeping in total darkness, coming back to Dr. Tlatla, and I think there also, although he was much elder than all the other comrades, all the other warders, but, they could care less. They would blatantly, use the word coolie, whether you were young, old, his position. I mean, they knew he was a doctor, but they could care less. I mean, whether you're a doctor. But, I must say, ironically, what had happened is that a few comrades, I think Comrade Jeffrey Mulala and Comrade Mox were released, and Comrade Richard Ramadipa, they were released. and they came back to the prison with Comrade Dr. Tata's cars. And when the police, when the wardens saw the cars that they were driving, and they asked them, whose cars are these? And the very warder they told, they instructed Dr. Tata to, to bring the chair and what have you. He was shocked. And I'm telling you, Shafinaaz, there was a total 360-degree turnaround in terms of their attitude towards him. So, I mean, I guess material things made them look at him from a different perspective. I don't know. But like I said, I mean, they could care less.
It just, for me, it's an interesting analysis looking at the book and that level of humiliation, and to try and measure, because the oppressor was considered a God-fearing, Bible-caring person. And to treat human beings like this, I have to wonder how much has changed over the years. Is it just laws, or is it the psyche of the people that has altered significantly? The other thing is we know when SAPS comes to visit, when the SA police comes to visit to check if detainees are being treated well, and they don't actually take consideration of any of the complaints that are sent their way. Those are all infuriating. The brutality of the time. They also the spirit of survival is very strong in your story, because I mean there's stories about the time when you have to set up the library and you take extra time to set up the library, or trying to find more time out of the jail cell just for your mental health, to be able to get into the sun and help with of hemming pants or unhemming pants, or whatever the case might have been. And the songs that were sang that they didn't understand, that the apartheid police didn't understand. I want you to speak a bit about struggle songs, because for me, in the sociological term is the hidden transcript. When you talk about Bob Marley and Tracy Chapman and many of the South African struggle songs, which our anthem derives from as well, are about encouraging and empowering those who were oppressed at the time. If you'd like to sing, I don't mind, but definitely speak to us about some of that.
Look. I mean, I don't listen to much music. I'll be honest with you, but there were lots of these songs. I mean, every occasion. I mean, they would, in our struggle, a song would develop. I mean, the one was, about comrades in the. Now, I'm talking about struggle songs. There was, I think it goes something like Gurule Kwatinova, Oh Mama, Oh Baba. It's about, cadres that are in the bush, the one Zia Ipitoli means, we are forwarding, we went forward to Pretoria. Now, Ipitoli means the administrative capital of South Africa. Then Senzenina is more like a lamenting song, because, it's what have I done, Zono Zetu Gugumyama is, my blackness is my only sin, but I must, one of the humorous incidents that happened there is that one of the comrades, now we were like the pariahs, that those of us that were in solitary confinement, we couldn't mingle with the other detainees. So one of the comrades, while they're waiting for breakfast, he started singing Kosi Sikaleli Africa, and this warder comes and swears him and says, "Don't use that. Don't sing that song. This is not Africa. This is Nelson Gevangenis, my prison." So the guy sings Zen Zenina, and one of the lines in Zen Zenina is "Amabono Awesinja," means white man, you're a dog. And this warder thought that, hey, you know what? They're singing a church song. And there he stood, cap in hand, and I guess, and he thought, we were singing a hymn. But I guess, seeing him being abused like that is like par for the course, I mean, I mean, there's a little victory, you can call it a victory, a humiliation that we could render to them, I think.
Karma, or a small sense of justice in this place of darkness. I definitely read it as sparks of justice during the very humiliating time of all of your detention. Post 94, what can you tell us? I mean, what happened then to the activists, to those coming together, and especially to your branch and your own journey forward from there?
So, I couldn't. I know one of the things that that happened to me is that I recall in 1990, 1987, I went to go and visit some of the comrades just before June the 16th. And the cops came looking for them, and a lot of them fled. And I also fled to Botswana. So I only came back home for a political a demonstration in 1992, which was apparently stopped by the AWB. But I came to back to Mudimole in 1994, and that's when I got involved with the elections, and then I got involved with the negotiations, on the negotiating forum for a transitional local council, and you know over the period of time during the process of negotiations, there was one battle after the other that we won. I mean, one I must indicate we weren't very conversant with the Transition Local Council Act, and thank God, there was a friend of mine, Karenza Malad, a comrade, and my brother Afzal. They provided us with documents. We actually got a company to also train us in negotiating skills. And believe you me, Shafinaaz, when we got onto that negotiating forum, I know we look like seasoned negotiators, right? So that was our little Codesa, period in Mudimule. One of the things that happened there is that they didn't allow the Muslim Jamaat to be on the council, and we had to fight that. So, so every step that you took, once we were on council, I was refused. Some of the Conservative Party members didn't want me to pray. So we had to fight our way through that. One of the other things that we did is the whole question of transforming the management, which was Afrikaner, middle aged, white. We had to male dominated. So we had to change all that and get comrades from all the other towns that were working with the expertise to come back to Mudimule. One of the other things that
Sinead,
we did also was, sorry.
yes. I think that obviously this struggle and this journey will carry forward in very many ways. And this is what makes a book of this nature so much more valuable and significant, not just in documenting your life story, but the struggle of the time, and I hope that a lot of youth are picking up this copy. The only reason I had to cut you short is because we've gone 2 minutes over time, and I've been given a nod from studio because they have another show on. But not to take away from the value that you've put together here and in the interview. Thank you so much for your time. I know that books can be got directly from you, so people can just look out for you on social media. And I know that this is a book that should be on every bookshelf in every house. Coolie Bandiet by Zunaid Mosam. Thanks again for your time, and we wish you everything of the best. Thank you for giving us your time on this Human Rights Day.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on the show. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Jazakallah khair. And there you have it. Zunaid Mosam with Coolie Bandiet. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time with another show of Book Bites. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.